to show you something that is hiding in plain sight on the world map. This is the Red Sea, 2,200 kilometers of water sitting between two of the most consequential land masses on the planet. Africa on this side, the Middle East on this side. And running between them, this thin ribbon of salt water has separated these two continents for as long as there are continents. Now, look at this spot right here, the Strait of Tiran. This is the gap between Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and the distance across it is about 13 kilometers at its widest point. 13 kilometers of water separating two continents. And then, way down here at the southern end, there is a second pitch point, the Bab el-Mandeb, called the Gate of Tears, about 30 kilometers across, but with this little island of Perim sitting right in the middle of it like a stepping stone. So the question I want to ask in this video is, why has no one decided to build a bridge across it? You can almost throw a rock from one to the other. The land connection between Africa and Asia in the entire world runs through here. The Sinai Peninsula into Israel and Palestine, then up into the rest of Asia. And because of the political situation in that corridor, large-scale trade through it is limited. So as of today in 2026, if you want to move a container goods from Cairo to Riyadh, moving goods from Cairo to Riyadh often involves indirect route or shipping. That can turn into a journey of several thousand kilometers by sea to move something across 13 kilometers of water. That is outrageously wild. But that's about to change, because right now in this exact spot, Saudi Arabia and Egypt have revived plans to build something that has been sitting on drafting tables for almost 40 years, a bridge across the Red Sea, connecting Africa to the Middle East for the first time in human history. The bridge sometimes is referred to as Moses Bridge. It's estimated to cost around $4 billion, but it's only the first piece of a much bigger plan, a corridor that when you add it all up has been estimated at up to $200 billion of infrastructure. And what I want to show you in this video is to show you exactly how they are going to build it, why it's happening now, and what it actually changes for Africa, for the Gulf, and for the global economy when you finally stitch these two continents together. So let's get into it. Okay, the first thing you need to understand is why this gap is even here. The Red Sea isn't just a sea, it is an active continental rift. The African plate and the Arabian plate are pulling away from each other by a centimeter a year. So this whole thing, Africa and the Middle East, used to be one giant mass and is slowly geologically ripping itself in two. Which means there is actually a deep canyon under all this water. In some places, it's 2,000 meters deep, way too deep to build a bridge. But there are two specific places where it's not. Up here at the entrance of Gulf of Aqaba, the rift narrows down dramatically. The water shallows, and you've got these two little islands, Tiran and Sanafir, sitting right in the middle of the strait. If you want to bridge this strait, you don't have to span the whole thing in one shot. You can hop from Egypt to Tiran to Sanafir to Saudi Arabia, 4 shorter spans instead of one long impossible one. That changes everything. A 7-kilometer span across water, that's a hard but solvable engineering problem. We've built bridges that long before. Hong Kong to Macau, the Oresung between Denmark and Sweden, the Akashi Kakyo in Japan, they are all doing. The other gap, the Bab el-Mandeb, uses the same trick, wider water, but the volcanic island of Perim sits right in the middle. Same logic, use the island as a pier, build the bridge in segment. So geographically, the bridges aren't crazy. The islands are sitting right where you want them to sit. The reason it hasn't happened is not geography, it's because of politics. Here is where this story gets really interesting, and I want you to follow me on the map because this is the kind of thing you have to see geographically to actually understand. The Gulf of Aqaba is this tiny finger of water with 4 countries on it. Egypt on this side, Israel up here at the top, Jordan right next to Israel, and Saudi on the other side. Israel's only access to the Red Sea is only southern shipping lane, runs through this Gulf from its port at Eilat, and to get out of the Gulf, every Israeli ship has to pass through the Strait of Tiran, right between these 2 islands. Whoever owns these islands technically controls Israel's access to the Red Sea, and in 1967, that's exactly what happened. Egypt closed the Strait of Tiran to Israeli shipping. That single act was one of the major triggers of the 6-day war. After the war, the island changed hands a few times. Israeli held them for a while, then Egypt got them back. By the 1980s, Tiran and Sanafi were considered Egyptian territory, monitored under the Camp David Accord with international observers stationed on Tiran itself. So fast forward to 2016, King Salman of Saudi Arabia goes to Cairo, and he and the Egyptian president Abdel Fattah el-Sisi announced something that nobody saw coming. Egypt is going to recognize this island as Saudi territory. Egyptians had grown up being told these islands were Egyptian. Soldiers had died defending them in 3 different wars. There were protests in Cairo, lawsuit in Egyptian court. The Supreme Administrative Court actually ruled the deal illegal, but the government overrode the court, parliament approved the deal, and in 2017 the islands were formally transferred to Saudi sovereignty. Here's the part that nobody talked about at the time. The transfer is widely believed to have been linked in part to future infrastructure plans like the bridge. You can't build a Saudi-Egyptian bridge across Strait of Tiran if the 2 key islands in the middle of the strait belong to a third country. You need them to be Saudi, and in 2017 they finally were. The political precondition was in place. So what are they actually building? The proposed bridge, roughly 30 kilometers long depending on the design, expected to be financed largely by Saudi Arabia. It starts here in Sharm el-Sheikh, the Egyptian resort city at the southern tip of Sinai Peninsula. This is one of Egypt's biggest tourism hubs, about 3 million visitors a year. International airport, 5-star hotels, world-class diving. The bridge launches from just north of the city, crosses about 7 kilometers of the open water, lands on Tiran Island. Tiran is mostly uninhabited, about 80 square kilometers, ringed by some of the most spectacular coral reefs on Earth, which is going to be one of the major engineering challenges of this whole project. The bridge crosses Tiran, hops 2.5 kilometers to Sanafi, the smaller island, and then makes the final 15-kilometer leap to the Saudi mainland at Ras Hamid, which lands you exactly here at the doorstep of NEOM. And we will come back to NEOM in a minute because it is a huge piece of why this bridge is happening at all. But first, the design. Proposal for the bridge include a 6-lane motorway and potentially a rail link for both passengers and freight. And on Tiran Island, they are planning to build a customs and border facility, basically a whole purpose-built town for processing the people and the cargo crossing the bridge. Construction timelines have been estimated at around 8 years. Potential contractors have included major firms like Saudi, Bin Laden Group, and Arab contractors on the Egyptian side. If completed, the journey from Africa to Asia takes about 30 minutes by car to cross between continents. That's faster than most people commute to work. Now the obvious question, the one I kept asking when I started researching this is, okay, why now? Like, why is this happening in 2026 when the idea has been sitting on the shelf since 1980s? The first serious proposal for a Red Sea bridge between Egypt and Saudi Arabia came in 1988. It went nowhere. In 2005, the Mubarak government in Egypt formally shelved the project. The reason given at the time was Israeli security concerns about the Strait of Tiran. Israel's freedom of navigation through the strait is guaranteed by the Camp David Accords, and any bridge across the strait raises questions about how that's enforced. In 2016, King Salman flew to Cairo. He brought with him roughly $25 billion package of investment and aid for Egyptian economy. And as part of that visit, he and Sisi announced the bridge was back on. Then the island got transferred, the diplomatic precondition was solved. Egypt and Saudi Arabia spent the next several years finalizing the engineering, and in mid-2025, Egypt's transport minister Kamel Al-Wazir said the planning was complete and that construction could begin once final approvals are in place. So what changed? Why this decade? 3 things, and you can actually see them on the map. The first thing is Vision 2030. In 2016, Saudi Arabia announced this massive economic plan called Vision 2030, basically a blueprint for diversifying the Saudi economy away from oil. The cornerstone of Vision 2030 is infrastructures, mega cities, tourism corridors, logistics hubs. The Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wants to turn Saudi Arabia into a global crossroad, physically, economically, and strategically. And the Moses Bridge is a perfect Vision 2030 project. It links Saudi Arabia directly to Egypt. It puts African tourists, pilgrims, and trade through Saudi territory. It anchors NEOM to a continent of 1.5 billion people. And it's symbolic. It's the kind of project a 21st century kingdom built to announce that it has arrived. The second thing is NEOM. NEOM is a $500 billion mega city being built on the northwest Saudi coast. It includes the line, a 170-kilometer linear city, Sindala, a luxury island, Trojena, a mountain ski resort in desert, Oxagon, a giant floating industrial complex. NEOM is supposed to host 9 million people by 2045, which is more or less the population of Switzerland. And to make that work, NEOM needs labor, it needs supply chains, it needs tourism, it needs to be connected to the rest of the world. Look at where NEOM sits. The Moses Bridge isn't being built next to NEOM by accident. NEOM is the entire economic justification for the bridge. And on the Egyptian side, the bridge plugs into a major government push to develop the Sinai. New industrial parks, new cities, new roads. Egypt has been trying to populate the Sinai for decades, and the Moses Bridge gives every Sinai project a sudden economic reason to exist. The third thing, and this is the one nobody talks about, is global trade fragility. Look at these 3 choke points: the Suez Canal, the Strait of Hormuz, the Bab el-Mandeb. These 3 pieces of water carry a significant share of global trade. In the last few years, all of them have come under pressure. The Ever Given, a 400-meter container ship, grounded itself in Suez Canal in 2021 and shut down 10% of global trade for almost a week. The Houthis started attacking ships in the Bab el-Mandeb in 2023, and global shipping rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope, adding 10 days and $1 million to every voyage. The Strait of Hormuz has been threatened multiple times by Iran during the various rounds of the Iran crisis. If you're a Gulf country watching this happen, you start to think about redundancy, about land alternative, about what happens to your economy if this choke point closed for real. The proposed bridge could be one answer to that question. It is the start of a land corridor. In theory, gives Saudi Arabia and Egypt a way to move freight, energy, and people between continents without putting it on the ship that has to pass through anyone else's water. That's why it's happening now. Vision 2030, NEOM, and a global trade environment that is rewarding land-based redundancy more than at any point in the last 50 years. The southern crossing is the more dramatic of the two. The original concept was drawn up by Cowie, the same Danish engineering firm that designed the Øresund Bridge back in 2008. The proposal called for 29-kilometer bridge with a 5-kilometer central suspension span, towers 400 kilometers above water, 6-lane motorway, full rail corridor, proposed capacity of up to 100,000 vehicles a day, plus brand new twin cities at each end, with the proposals suggesting millions of residents. The total program cost, bridge plus cities plus supporting infrastructure, was estimated at around $200 billion. The economic logic of Southern Bridge is even bigger than the northern one. Look at this. Ethiopia, second largest country in Africa by population, landlocked. About 90% of Ethiopia's external trade currently flows through the port of Djibouti. A bridge from Djibouti to Yemen and from Yemen to the rest of the Arabian Peninsula could in theory give Ethiopia more direct overland trade route to Saudi Arabia, the Gulf, and the wider Asian economy. It will do the same for Kenya, Sudan, the East African community, the entire Horn of Africa. And to the Arabian side, it gives the Gulf states direct land access to East Africa, which by most projections will be the fastest growing regional economy on the African continent for the next 20 years. When you put both bridges together, the Moses Bridge in the north and the eventual southern crossing, what you actually have is a Y-shaped continental corridor. The northern arm connects North Africa, Egypt, and the Mediterranean basin to the Gulf states. The southern arm connects East Africa, the Horn, and the Indian Ocean basin to the Arabian Peninsula. Both arms converge in Saudi Arabia, which becomes geographically, economically, structurally the bridge state, the country through which Africa connects to Asia. That is the $200 billion plan. That is what these projects together build. And that is what makes the Moses Bridge, even though it's just 32 kilometers of causeway, historically important. Okay, the Moses Bridge isn't the end of the corridor, it's the node. Look at what connects to each side. On the Saudi side, the bridge plugs into something called the GCC Railway. This is a 6-country, 2,000-kilometer rail network linking Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. Construction is underway. When it's complete, you will be able to take a train from Saudi side of the Red Sea all the way to Dubai, and from the Dubai to eventually onward into Iraq. When that's complete, the GCC rail plus the development road plus the Moses Bridge gives you a continuous land freight route from Egypt all the way to Istanbul. On the African side, the Moses Bridge connects Egypt's road network, which connects to the Trans-African Highway. The flagship corridor of that network is the Cairo-Cape Town Highway, 8,000 kilometers of road from Egypt to South Africa.